First, the IRS scandal is real. It's not pretend, it's real. Number two, the IRS scandal is not just a boneheaded bunch of bureaucrats in some remote office, contrary to what the President of the United States told the American people on Sunday. And number three, the IRS scandal is not over. It is continuing to this day, and the Department of Justice investigation is a sham. It is a non-existent investigation.
Well, there you have it. Attorney Cleta Mitchell not holding back at yesterday's hearing of the House Oversight Committee.
Yeah, the testimony from that attorney, who represents about a dozen Tea Party groups, it raises new concerns that we are not seeing the end of this scandal and that not enough is being done to investigate it. So let's debate all of that with Guy Benson from townhall.com, political editor and talk radio host, and Julie Roginski, Democratic strategist, both Fox News contributors. Welcome to both of you.
Hi. Can we talk about
Allie.
Abbey Road for a second? That's the best Beatles album. Just to go back to a previous
Is that your favorite? I will allow you to tweet us.
Thank you.
On that.
I already did.
Okay, very good. Very good. Meanwhile, Julie, I do want to start with you. She called it a sham, the investigation. She said it's a non-existent investigation. Is it a non-existent investigation? And if it is a real investigation, why was President Obama acting like it was all over as well?
Well, you know, I know what Cleta Mitchell wants to believe, and I know what she's saying, and I know that certainly Darrell Issa and others in the House who are leading their own investigation have said something. But what the president said was very succinct. He said there was no corruption. Corruption implies criminal activity. And I have yet to see any evidence so far. Now, it may emerge, but I have seen no evidence so far. And I don't think either Cleta Mitchell or Darrell Issa or anybody else on that committee can prove that there was any kind of criminal activity.
Is that a semantics game that he's playing? In other words, no corruption, nothing illegal, but clearly something bad happened. 80% of the people who were slow-rolled for extra scrutiny were conservatives, and 12% were liberals.
Well, he was asking, first of all, he was answering a question that Bill O'Reilly posed to him about corruption, so he was responding specifically to that. I don't think he was using semantics. He was answering a specific question about a specific word. In terms of what the Tea Party was targeted, yeah, I mean, overwhelmingly conservatives appear to have been targeted. I have been a big proponent, and I think this applies to both sides of the aisle, whether it's Obama for America, Organizing for America, or Karl Rove's groups, or anything in between. These 501c4 organizations have been set up ostensibly as charities or educational charities, whereas in fact they're really posing on both sides of the aisle as political organizations. I think the IRS should be cracking down on both sides more carefully about that, because otherwise the tax code is being abused to further a partisan political agenda, which I think is totally wrong on both sides of the aisle.
You know, Guy, on Sunday, the president sort of dismissed the whole thing, no systemic corruption. He said it's just boneheaded decisions by a couple of renegade agents in Cincinnati. Suddenly yesterday, we see this email presented in the House Ways and Means Committee. Got a copy of it here, and it's not a couple of agents in Cincinnati. It's Lois Lerner in Washington, together with 5 deputy and associate chief counsels. And it's deliberately designed targeting. Does that completely undermine and belie the president?
Of course it does. And he also said in previous interviews and previous discussions that there was no political motivation behind any of this either. And I just think that doesn't pass the laugh test. Look at, if you would for a moment, the timeline here. Over the course of 2 highly contested election cycles, you had the IRS, which is populated by mostly liberal left bureaucrats, cracking down on the president's political opposition through a series of secretive targeting practices. Now, when they discovered that their machinations were going to be divulged to the public through that Inspector General report, they decided they would leak this information to the public. They did so by planting a question at a Q&A, then lying about the planted question, then admitting, okay, fine, it was planted.
So their credibility is immediately suspect.
Right, and the White House then changed their story about half a dozen times about when and how they found out about the targeting. And let's not forget the woman at the center of this, Lois Lerner. She has refused to testify before Congress, invoking her right not to incriminate herself. So the idea that there's no corruption and no political motivation is ludicrous.
Julie, as you know, there's a woman at the DOJ named Barbara Bosterman. She is leading up this investigation. She has contributed more than $6,000 to President Obama's campaigns. Is that appropriate?
Listen, and Darrell Issa has contributed, I don't know how much money to Republican campaigns. He's heading up the congressional investigation. The reality is this. You have the Deputy Inspector General of the Treasury Department saying that he has seen no corruption. Now, you may say that's Obama's Treasury Department, and of course it is. But I challenge Guy or anybody else, including Cleta Mitchell, to point to specific corruption.
Yeah.
Just because you want to believe it doesn't make it so. There's no evidence about it.
Guy, how is it possible that the DOJ and the FBI are apparently ending their investigation without ever interviewing a single individual of the 41 targeted groups represented by Jay Sekulow? How can you end an investigation without ever talking to the alleged victims?
I have no clue. You'd have to ask them. It doesn't sound particularly thorough to me. And in response to Julie, I'm not here saying that there's any proven corruption or criminal activity, but I do think it's odd because there's these new regulations that the IRS has now announced. They've rolled them out, governing 501c4 organizations, and it's really quite restrictive. It really restricts these groups' ability to engage in political speech.
Good.
And what the White House has said, Julie, is this was done to clarify these confusing rules, which, by the way, existed for decades without a problem, as a response to the scandal. But now we've seen emails proving that these regulations and rules were starting to be written as far back as 2011, which, of course, was not done in response to the scandal. So there are things that don't smell right about this, which is why I think investigations are important.
All right, we'll see what happens. Guy, Julie, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.